it's less than an ADA standard, but given our very limited space, kind of something it's stroller with, it's a person can get through. So that's what Linda's talking about. So in some cases, cars are parked on the sidewalk a little bit, but there's still enough space for a pedestrian to get through on that same sidewalk. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean that's a different issue though, and actually I think prior to this topic that we're discussing, we were going to try to address that by making some streets one way, because right now when you issue a parking permit, the people that have that problem, they're still going to consider those sidewalks as legit to park. I mean, where else are you going to park? That's the case in my street, and if you go to Upper Brisbane, that's what they do over there too.
There's less sidewalks in Upper Brisbane, and the lower streets where the children are walking to school are the ones that need to make the biggest change, unfortunately, in order to keep the kids safe. And that was what the entire pedestrian safe routes to school was about, that we worked on for forever. I think it was over a year until we finally came up with some solid ideas. But Mariposa Street is a particularly tough one. It's a hill and limited parking, and I don't know what the solution is there for the residents, but having a parking permit will certainly invite them to park somewhere else, even, on another street, Solano or something, where we did not eliminate parking places, and we were kind of thinking about it at one point. So.
Okay. I think the consensus of everyone, if I'm reading correctly, we are kind of moving towards the thought of issuing a fixed number of permits per dwelling, at least to start. And the number I've heard most frequently is 2. Am I correct in that? Is that where we think we're headed with this? Okay.
That's my understanding. Yes.
Okay. Let me throw out a counterpoint way of looking at it. I can support that 100%, but I was also thinking of some other things. And that is that what we have now, even though it is
Can't hear you, Pat.
Oh. We have now, even though it is a pain to park, does every day, it has worked. Everybody's gotten their car parked.
You're going in and out.
Okay. Better now?
I'll let you know.
I don't know what you missed. I don't know what came through, but at the end of the day, what we have now gets their car parked one way or another. It's a pain. So in a sense, in my mind, to at least start with the least upheaval to people in Brisbane is to just give as many permits as they want. I'll just throw that out there as an idea. And then over time, say we are going to start cutting this back for a several year period. Well, okay, so, but look, permit has to be tied to the address. It has to be for a vehicle registered at that address to a driver whose driver's license is at that address, or their voter registration or something. You can't, or their utility bill or something. It can't be just, I'm not a supporter of selling them, okay? Because I think then it becomes, a bidder's market, and that's not, I don't think that's what we're trying to accomplish. Anyway, did you hear me that much?
Yeah, I was going to sell them. That's why I wanted 10. There's actually one property that I think I've mentioned before on Kings Road that has about 10 cars. I don't know. I haven't been up there in a while, so I don't know if they still do, but they're all registered, that residence. How do you deal with something like that? They're taking up a large amount of parking where there would normally be extra parking for other cars, and there always was before. This became a thing. So
Yeah.
how would you deal with that?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. Short of regulating and having an enforcement that a household can only park X number of cars on the street. Okay. And what I'm saying is, you start out implementing a permit system that allows everybody to do what they are doing now.
Mhm.
And then after 12 months, permits away, or 3 or whatever, until we get down to, say, 2 permits per resident or something like that.
Okay.
And just a thought, fine. But I think the consensus of the committee is to start with 2 permits now and have an appeal process or something, where, say, if a household had 3 adults in it, 3 cars, they could come back to the city and say, hey, here's why we need 3 cars, 3 permits, and it could accommodate that. And I would support that, the consensus of the committee. I think that was a very workable plan as well. So does anybody want to kind of throw up a motion of what
Well,
we might, go ahead.
I think that what you explained about giving permits to the status quo right now with the number of cars that people have is a softer approach, and I'm anticipating
Yep.
a lot of pushback. And either do it your way. I mean, I was all for 2, but in thinking about it, your way sounds like a gentler way to go into the permit process, because I mean, Christian is already going to have a problem with it because he doesn't have a garage to park in, right, Christian?
Yeah, so I think Karen has her hand raised, but I will say this. I will say this though. We should probably take one decision at a time and maybe do an effort to tease them out. Like, I think the consensus is 2, but then in terms of how do we go about, because it's going to, obviously the need to have more parking permits is going to be there. So how do we go about issuing more parking permits? And that should be, a discussion. And also in terms of every car that we give a permit needs to be registered to that address, and that driver needs to be. That might raise some, concerns, because that might, a household doesn't really necessarily. If you have a driver that is from out of state and is driving somebody else's car, so it's almost per household. And then the stickers you probably identify that. So that we might run into problems, if we go that route. But I think you also might need more time to discuss it.
I think a good example of that came to mind, Christian, you kind of brought that to my mind, is my partner. In the past, he lived in Monterey, and for a period of time, they had a permit program on his street, and he went to go get a permit for his vehicle, but they wouldn't give it to him because his car was registered to his parents' house, because it was his parents' car that he was using. So it wasn't registered in his name, but obviously that was his car. And so he basically ended up having to move the car every other day, or wipe off the little mark that they put on, the old chalk, try to keep them from ticketing him. And he lived there. It wasn't like he didn't live on that street. So that is a issue I think that we'll have to discuss when we, for sure.
Well, that's probably one of those exceptions that we can take in when people ask for additional permits or something.
I think maybe just having another option, like a utility bill or mail.
Oh,
or
absolutely.
to show that
Yeah.
you live
Yes. Something else that proves
not
you
just
live
the
there.
car. Yeah, per se.
Yeah.
But I do personally, I'm on kind of more on the side of the two to start. And it was kind of funny because at the beginning I was like, just do it to anyone too at the very beginning of this meeting. But as we go through the meeting, I'm kind of like, I think it's better if we go with give two and then have that option of more, you know, with the caveat. Just my
Thank you.
I'd
Karen,
like to hear from Darius. I'm sorry.
Karen's
Karen's
had her hand up.
I'll shut
Yeah,
up.
for a long time.
Just two things. On your idea, Patrick, your idea was the reason is to get to the right number, not just issue a permit to everybody. That's, to me, it's a little bit confusing because how is that different than just letting people park now without having to have a permit?
The first year would be no different. That's right. It would. My thought is that it gets people used to the idea of having permits. And in the back of their mind, most people will know, and it could even be that this will be reduced.
Yeah. Well, it's softer, but it's still pretty cool. Just kind of delayed. And then the second part is it kind of made me think about for the committee to consider, and I think Linda's example was kind of a Vanagon. Let's say someone has an RV or a boat and it's a recreation thing. Should people be allowed to store that street if it's not their transportation? Like, do we want to provide that space, or do you think that that's the responsibility of the person who owns that to fit it on their property or have a storage space somewhere there?
Committee, what do you think? Linda, is your hand up or not? No.
No, I was thinking, but I will put it up. I'm
Okay.
wondering if someone could switch out their parking place and use their permit to put their car on the street and put their RV in their parking space. And that's an option. That's really the only one I can think of other than storing it. Storing it is expensive and it's not right there where you can keep an eye on it. I mean, I love knowing where my van is and, you know, grabbing it and running somewhere every once in a while.
Does anyone park a boat on the streets in Brisbane? I don't think I've ever seen a boat. I've seen RVs and vans and such, but I don't know. I mean, I'm just thinking a boat is really on a trailer is real easy to steal.
Didn't we see a boat down on Mariposa Street, the beginning of Mariposa by Alvarado, in one of the driveways or in the alleys between the houses or something? I remember something.
I don't remember. Okay.
It might have been just a boat trailer, but I think you're right. Most boats would be parked somewhere else unless they have a huge piece of property. But RVs are
RVs. So a Volkswagen Vanagon is not to me exactly an RV. It's the same size.
No, it's not.
It's
Sleeps
a passenger
four, but
vehicle size, right?
Yeah.
Whereas a Winnebago that's 25 feet or more long and 10 feet wide is, I think, a different animal. And I think, I don't know if anyone's parking those on streets in Brisbane, but I think that's something we would not want. There has to be a limit that RVs should not be parked on the street with or without a permit program. Our streets are so narrow. I think that just creates traffic problems.
I think I saw, I don't know if it's still there in South San Francisco, there was a storage place where you could easily pull in your RV and it was protected and gated and fenced.
Okay.
And maybe a facility like that would be an option. Again, I don't know what it costs and if it's reasonable, but I think you're right. Large things like that. And I haven't seen many around town. There was one up on Paul Avenue, but they built a driveway for it.
Right.
Yeah, specifically for it. And I haven't really seen a bunch. There is something down here on Alvarado, I think on the 2300 block, corner of San Bruno and Alvarado, just in a little bit. where they have a huge white van. I think they do audio voiceover type stuff there. But it's bigger than your vehicle.
Okay. Like almost like a delivery size, like
Yeah.
Amazon uses or something. Yeah.
And bigger
Yeah.
than that, but
Yeah.
it's used every day and it's their work. So, you know,
Yes.
there's going to be such a mix of stuff that we have to look at.
Right. Christian, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I mean, to be practical, I think we should probably go by the DMV definition of what are, commercial transportation cars or vehicles, because I think that's the scope of the park permit. We don't want to be, throwing RVs and boats and all this stuff. Although I would add though, how would you consider a motorcycle? Because there are people that drive a lot of motorcycles. Would that be one permit? Do they need one? I don't know.
They generally don't leave them on the street. I mean, you have seen them on the street when we did our walk, but
Right.
I don't know. That's an interesting question.
I've generally seen motorcycles that are off street or sort of consciously parked, I rarely do you see one in the middle of a parking spot, I think, but maybe it's something we need to also think about, yeah.
Wonder what the other cities did with them. We didn't really research that.
We did not ask that. No.
I'm wondering if we did P-mark streets to, so people don't park sloppily, if we could put a couple of,
Unintended.
vertical small parking spots on each block, maybe one or two, depending on where it is, for motorcycles. And they would also need a permit, because then it takes the mystery out of where can I park.
Karen, is there a way to find out how many motorcycles we have in town?
I don't know. What I was going to say was the T marks are challenging, though. We have them outside of City Hall. Is that cars are different lengths, and nowadays really small cars, smart cars, type of things, they don't need the same amount of space that a big truck does. So then you end up wasting frustration of people if you all of that exactly, and there was this wasted space that could be used.
Most places I've parked lately have compact parking and regular vehicle size parking. So maybe some could be designated as compact and others not compact.
On the street you're talking about?
Yeah.
I know the ones on Visitation are very short. The parallel parking, they are very short.
Angled.
No, the parallel
So,
parking.
Linda, are you suggesting we mark the street?
Well, I think it would stop the problem of people parking, I don't want to say stupid, but, inappropriately, where they're taking up more than they need to keep some space behind them and some in front of them. And by the end of the day, when everything's parked up, 3 more cars could have parked there if they had parked thoughtfully.
That this is something that I think it sort of reflects what Patrick has been saying, that somehow everybody finds where to park, and I think this is one of those situations where chaos becomes a benefit, because if you have all this marks and all that, a lot of people are going to be left out.
It's possible, yeah.
I'm going to
it's a
ask
big
us.
change.
Yeah, I'm going to ask us to, let's put that in the parking lot. I've made a note on it because we're kind of getting off the topic of how many permits at the moment. So
In the parking lot.
Yeah. No pun intended, right? No pun intended.
Baloney. That was a pun if I ever heard one.
I think the consensus is 2 permits per dwelling. Mechanism that we haven't figured out yet, some sort of mechanism requests additional. Do does someone want to make a motion to this regard, that this is our recommendation?
So move.
Okay, let's capture the right words. Linda, you were, I think, the first one to put this out there. You want to put some words to it? Some
No, I want
language?
you to. You're a lot more awake than I am.
Okay,
I don't know that you have to make a motion. We're just taking minutes.
okay. I just want us to have a last meeting on where the parking zones are, a formalization that this is the consensus of the committee, and we get it.
I think that's a good idea, Patrick. I agree with
And
you.
right now, it's just me talking, that I think this is the consensus of the committee. I want to make sure that that is indeed the consensus.
Gregory or Darius, would you like to make the motion?
Sure, I can make the motion that we have a consensus that we have for the parking program that we'll be doing 2 per household with a possibility for additional pending further discussion on sections.
And 1 per ADU.
And 1 per ADU.
I second the motion.
Yeah.
Okay.
All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
All right. Do we need to, I don't think we need to do a roll call, but it is, I think, by acclamation at this point. Is that right, Karen, or did we just make a real motion?
Let's go with what you just said, affirmation.
Okay. Okay, that was a big one to get through. Now,
Feels
before we go to,
good.
yeah,
Feels
that
good to
does
nail
feel
something
good.
down. Thanks, everybody.
I've got 740, and I think the next item on the list is guest parking, but I think before we get to that, see if we can talk about what are the criteria for appeal. Since this is fresh in our mind, see if we can work through some of that. Linda, was your hand up, or?
Oh, I'm sorry, no.
Okay,
I'll roll it down when I'm not up.
okay. Any thought on how we should allow appeals to be approved? You know, somebody says, I need 3. And it's a valid request, say.
It should be approved. But how do you determine a valid request, I guess, is the
Right,
question.
right.
And who's determining it, I guess? Is this,
And what's
it
the
comes back to-
qualification?
And we have to set the guidelines for determining it, or suggest the guidelines for determining it.
Well,
So-
I think you should probably charge. The third parking permit should cost money. I don't know how much. Number one, and then number two, you have to have the same requirements as the 2 initial permit, but with the obvious need that they need a third one. So they need to show 3 registrations and who's going to be the driver and some justification. But I would say to that, at that point, we might also have some sort of idea what is Brisbane, capacity for parking in general, just to see how much overboard we're going to go.
I'd like to respond to Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Will our parking permit program really have anything to do with capacity? Because our capacity, I'm guessing, are not our capacity, but our use will probably fall somewhat, a little anyway, with the requirement of parking permit. People that don't live here, that park here for whatever reason, are going to be eliminated. And we can't set a capacity limit with people that do live here and what we've already got, because we're already living with it. Question is, how how do we make it work? And I think eliminating the people that have no right to park here long term or whatever, and we're doing our best to police that. That'll eliminate that problem, and kind of go from there. But we can't change the number of cars that are on the street right now, other than do what gets naturally eliminated with the permit process or permit program.
Also,
Yeah,
and not to mention, a permit program might get like people who have multiple cars to maybe reduce their number of cars.
Or put them in the
Which is
garage.
actually good for the environment, by the way.
Yeah. Or put them in the garage.
With,
Put them in the
with,
garage.
with that point in mind, should we be setting, Linda, this comes back to your comment of the house on Kings Road,
Mhm.
10 cars. And I remember when we started looking at parking two and a half years ago, James mentioned, I forget, he lives in the lower Brisbane. He had a
Right.
neighbor who had umpteen some odd number of cars,
Yeah.
and he found it very irritating. So that leads me to wonder, should we set a limit to the maximum number of permits that could be granted to any one property?
And I
Should
think
we be
that would
doing
be
that?
wise. It's how do we find that number? But I think that
Yes.
would be a wise thing to do. Anybody have any ideas?
Yeah, I feel strongly against. I don't know. I feel like I'm not sure
Okay.
we can limit someone's. If they want to buy as many cars as they want, if they're, I guess if we allow them to purchase permits or something, or I don't know. My neighbor also. I have a neighbor, full disclosure, who has a lot of cars, and I do find it annoying. But I feel like I'm not sure I can, limit him also if he wants the cars, kind of thing. So I don't know. Can we say that? Yeah. I'm not sure.
Well,
Yeah.
we're not
We're
not saying they
conflicted on
can't
that part,
have
of
cars.
course.
We're
Yeah.
not saying they can't have cars.
But
It's
apparently the
just-
permits, though. Like if there's no
Darius?
avenue for them to have more permits.
They just need to find someplace else to park.
Yeah. Darius, are they a car collector? Are they someone that buys cars, abandons them on the street, never drives them?
No, they do drive them. They move them. They do collect them. They do move them around. They do. Yeah, it's motorcycles and cars and sort of both. So he's very. It's not
There are people that just never
abandoned.
get rid
Yeah.
of cars,
Yeah.
and they take up parking places, and they don't care about.
But I guess doesn't the
neighbors.
current system take care of that with the 72-hour, or is that just not being like? Is there just people aren't complaining about it or not, or there's an enforcement of that?
I think you have to complain with our resources right now to get something.
I guess
done.
yeah. Because my concern is that the parking, like this, will have a huge cost, and then someone has to enforce this. And if no one's going around enforcing this, it'll have the same. People can still abandon the car if no one's going to actively drive around looking at permits. And that's a big cost to have. That.
So the current
Back to that.
72 hours, when Commander Garcia was with us a few
Yes,
meetings,
that's right. Yeah.
he said the way it worked was they wait. When they are out on patrol, they are not looking at that. When they receive a complaint from a resident, then they will go and put a sticker on the car. And
then it's 72 hours. Yeah.
right. And if somebody lives there and they see the sticker on the car, they're going to move the car.
Mhm.
They know, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if it's an Uber to the airport, they will not know. Their car will get towed. So I think the 72-hour rule kind of takes care of some of that. But if somebody's collecting cars and is actively moving them as a resident,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a hard thing. We can't all be Jay Leno with a giant garage somewhere, right, to keep all our wonderful cars.
So maybe one option is just sort of escalating costs, that it becomes sort of,
Maybe
inhibitive
escalating costs. Yeah.
It's a
of
good
permit,
idea.
right? That after second permit or whatever, doubles and triples in costs for additional permits per individual, right? Maybe if you have multiple individual drivers, it's different if it's one person.
And then that might make it such that the cost of the permit is approaching the cost of parking it somewhere else
Mhm.
in a storage facility or something. That's a good idea. I've got two. We have other items on the agenda. Shall we call a halt to where we are today? We did get a major decision or major consensus, which I feel really good about. And I know we have a couple of other things on the agenda, so we can stop by 8, let everyone go home and have dinner. Karen, shall we move to new business? The letter of support, Karen?
Yeah, that's a good idea. The latest grant cycle of these more local, or I should say regional grants that we staff favors because there's a little bit less administrative burden to apply and to report on them, and you're not getting federal dollars. It's just a lot easier to implement. One came up and we didn't meet last month, so the grant was, the call for project was issued, and it was a short turnaround time to get a project in. So we went to the list that the committee had made. So it was a bicycle pedestrian grant from the San Mateo County Transportation Board. And we went to the list that the committee had looked at when we talked about expanding safe pedestrian routes. And there was a lot of input on some of these. There are properties the city owns that were originally utility easements, generally 20 feet wide between hillside streets. And in some cases, there are stairways, such as the Bicentennial Walkway. And we did get a grant to extend the Alvarado to San Benito. So we looked at, and the TA, San Mateo County TA, has a great process where they kind of pre-screen your project. You have a short meeting with them and they look at kind of whether staff sees it as valid. So we talked about one of the priorities that we wanted to build was the Tulare to Santa Clara mid-block. And I said, you know, there aren't a lot of regional applications to this. It's important to the community because you've got narrow, windy streets, park, got no sidewalk, and it's a way for neighbors to get down to, activity centers and the library and the park and all of these locations. And but we also want to do the next street below it. And there's this concern about wildland fires that people have an evacuation route. If engine or fire engines, multiple engines come down the street, it's a dead end street and it's walking cars, we want to have a way to walk. So they kind of folded into, well, why don't you apply for construction of the upper one and then ask for the design funds for the lower one. And I also mentioned the walkway that had come up prior iteration of the committee from San Francisco Avenue to Old County at Bayshore, which people use to get to possibly commute.org, but also to Samtrans, the Park and Ride. And they said, well, why don't you apply for the design for that too and call it, the Central Brisbane, well, Tomascano, but tie them all together in that there are many ways to get people to transit, get people to take walk trips instead of driving trips. And the way the grant is written, they can decide that they don't have all the funding, they can give us partial. So they like that type of project. So that's what we put the application in for. So without the meeting in September, we communicated with the chair and asked him to review our draft letter and sign it on behalf of the committee. So we wanted to ratify that by all aware the general support of it.
Thank you. That's fantastic. When will we know?
Tomas, do you remember? It's probably in
we should know in by November for sure, but it could be this month as well. They said late October, November on the application.
Okay, great. Let us know if it comes when it comes out. Just let us know. I think we'd all be interested to know, even if it's not in a meeting. I mean, just can you send us a email, a group email? Sure. Great, thank you.
So as new business, I don't know if to ratify that, maybe it makes sense to have a motion and a vote. Is that okay?
We do need a motion and a vote?
Because it's new business, I think
yes.
maybe
Could I have a motion then to support this letter to the San Mateo?
I'll move to support the letter.
Right.
Second.
Could we have roll
Second
call?
the motion.
Sure. Cabrera,
Aye.
Detmer.
Aye.
Becker,
Aye.
Sorry.
Painter,
Aye.
and Wad.
Aye.
I think we're all falling asleep tonight. Okay. Staff update?
You know what? I didn't prepare any, but I know that 2 meetings ago, you asked me about the refuge area at the crossing on Valley Drive, the Crocker. So the Crocker Trail
Finished.
is the one at 140 Valley, Crocker Trail crossing.
Yeah.
And it was hit by a truck, and it hadn't been installed at the time that you asked. The railing had not been reinstalled because I guess there's quite a backlog in terms of galvanizing metal. So I believe it's installed.
It's there now. I imagine there's still cones around it, but the guardrail is all up. Looks properly and solid, installed and solid and completed. But maybe the concrete still has to set. I'm not sure. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for looking into that. Any chair or so?
I don't know if Tomas had any staff updates.
I was gonna mention we mentioned the Sierra Point, that matter about having a representative here.
Oh, exactly. Thank you.
But I bet, yeah, you could probably, more, a little bit more about it.
Tomas will share some things on screen, but there's the council has, and with the help of staff, brought on a consultant to review an area out at Sierra Point to create a park. Some type. I know very little. And they formed an ad hoc subcommittee with members of Parks and Recreation and Open Space and Ecology because park ecological components. But recently we were told the council wanted to add a complete street member to this committee. So they kicked off and let the consultant talk about existing conditions that they plan to take, later on in October, I think, and go to the site. These meetings, first one was in the evening, so I think it was like 6 p.m. And so we are looking for one member of the committee. So the area in blue is all that's being considered. A lot of this is the shared use parking area, but if you look at where Sierra Point Parkway terminates on the west end before you get out in the docks, that triangle is highlighted in any way. Is kind of a major focus of the park, but I guess there's an option to use some of the parking area to expand a park. So there's a web page with members, and there's a description of what the project entails, and I guess the consultant has a scope of work. So we're looking for a volunteer, and I can forward more detail to whoever.
I would gladly volunteer for that if no one else wants to. Yeah.
Okay.
Please
Darius,
do.
the early bird gets the worm. It's yours.
I have a soft spot for that area. That's biotech.
You ought to
and the
join
yacht
a
club's
game
right
show.
there, so
That's great.
Excellent.
If I would like to suggest that what Darius picked up, he brings back so that we can discuss, because there's a lot of things that go into helping decide these things, traffic circulation.
that area especially. Especially with the new buildings and everything. I think that's
And
lots of discussion.
pedestrian and visual comfort things, serene things, separate from play areas. There's a lot of things we can suggest with our experience. So I think that'd be great if you did it, since you're very familiar with the area. Thank you. I don't want to do it.
Okay. Or committee member, no chair matters. Any committee member matters that you guys would like to bring up? Yes,
Just
Linda.
one thing. One of the people in the public came to me and said that they had an issue with leaving City Hall and turning left to go north on Bayshore because the
You mean Valley Drive? You mean Valley Drive?
Yes.
Yeah.
Turning left. The median is a little further out than most of them when we turn left, and very often they have to kind of manipulate enough to not hit that median because it's not set back. So I don't know if there's anything we can do about it, or anything that it would be very expensive to change. But I did want to just mention that it's a concern with someone in town.
I'm trying. I make that turn quite a lot. I don't think there's a median. There's not a raised median. It's just paint on the ground. If I'm
I
thinking
think
of the right intersection.
Sort of a I think it's got, it's funny when none of us know. I think it's got rock embedded in it. It's river rock rounded.
Oh, it does.
It is
okay.
raised, yeah. I checked
Okay.
it out.
All right. Okay.
Do
So-
they drive a large vehicle? I don't know.
Not really. No.
And I don't remember if we have, thought we put out some white spots to delineate. We have 2 lanes turning, which often no one's in the outside lane turning, so not a problem.
Wait, is this turning from Bayshore onto Valley Drive or from City Hall onto Valley Drive?
From Valley Drive on to Bayshore going north. And
Onto
I did
Bayshore.
drive it.
Okay.
And it does
Okay.
seem, once somebody pointed it out, it did seem to be a little more intrusive than some of the other media. But not so much that I think it would cause an accident or be a danger.
That is a tough intersection. I make the other turn, left turn from Broadway onto, I'm sorry, from Bayshore onto Valley. And I had sent in a go request several months ago because trucks are always the lines were gone. You know, it's a 2-lane turn. The lines are gone. The trucks are always cutting that corner, and they've been painted again. But I thought that intersection was going to get completely restriped, Karen, and upgraded and such. This was several years ago before COVID. Randy had mentioned that. But
I can check. I don't know
okay.
that pavement maintenance wise it's due for treatment very soon. We've done Bayshore. Maybe we didn't change any of this. It's been a while since we've done anything on Bayshore.
I believe the reason for delaying at that time was that it would get repaved, like the other part of further south section of. That was my understanding, if I understood correctly, that it was going to get repaved like the more southern part of Bayshore did a couple of years ago. And so there was no point in restriping and such, just to pave over it and have to do it again.
But your request was more around refreshing and striping as it is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I didn't look at the turn that Linda was talking about.
If
The
you ever
left,
do, just notice that
I'm going to,
it's not set back like it is in most other left turn with the median. And I don't think it's dangerous. It's just a little bit.
Be interesting to see if there are a lot of like tire marks on the concrete.
I think you'll see mine.
Karen, can the city look at that? Staff look at that? Somebody.
Yeah. Well,
Thank you. Any other committee member matters?
I have a question for staff. They could provide some insight of what's going on Bayshore. I know they're digging a trench, but that's what I can see. But I don't know the detail.
hey, Jenny, digging a trench. Hey, Christian, I don't review
It's a
permit.
gas line. It's a gas line.
Gas line out to Sierra
Gas line?
size gas service. It was in the blast, and actually, I think that's how I heard.
Mm. But
It
when
looks
they
like-
do type of stuff like that, they don't communicate to staff to you guys.
No.
You're part of traffic.
There's other parts of Public Works that Public Works Director reviews the permits, and our Public Works Inspector inspects their applying the permit. So I'm not directly involved usually. But yeah, it was in the blast, right? That work was
I saw it in somewhere in the blast or some other publication. Yeah, that's where I saw it.
Okay.
It looked like plastic pipe. I don't know how they put gas in plastic pipe, but they were.
Yeah, I mean, it's major work and it's definitely affecting traffic. It brings all the usual, safety issues and disturbance and all that, and it keeps going.
It'd be nice if they had put up a sign like Caltrans does on the highway, work from this date to that date, so everybody knows when it's going to be completed, right?
I mean, I sometimes read the blast, but not all the time, so I missed that one.
Right.
But that's a good point that you brought in, where they should make it a norm where you put a sign such day we're going to start work over here, and it's going to start from here and it's going to end this date, something like that.
And non-residents don't read the blast ever, right? People who are commuting from San Francisco south, right? Daly City, come through there or whatever, or whoever. So
Yeah,
I think that would enhance safety as a general suggestion for city process.
I mean, the reality is, put in a line like that, there's already a lot of utilities, and there's a lot of utilities shoulders. You have to pick a lane to do it, and I don't know exactly.
Understood.
But we don't
Understood.
do it during hours, generally on Bayshore.
They had it well marked for northbound, but it comes and goes. It seems like they're done because they seem to pave over it every night and then disappear for a few days, and then all of a sudden they're digging up again. It just would be nice to know what to expect on a longer term basis.
yeah, and also it might be sometimes a good opportunity to go work with them if you have some other underground work. I'm thinking of that street light. We only have the poles, and I think the long-term thinking there was to eventually put a street light.
Or traffic light.
Yeah, traffic light.
Yeah, but that's not funded yet by council. It's on their CIP plan as something to potentially fund, but it's not funded yet. Signalize that.
That's San Bruno Avenue in Bayshore.
Yeah. Bayshore, yeah. So with all this infrastructure, government funding, is that something that might be a good opportunity to look into to see if that creates more of a fast track to get that addressed? Sooner or later, we need it. And the idea was, let's get a traffic light, but we ended up just like doing this as a stepping stone what we have right now.
I'm not sure I completely understood what you were asking. It was fast track. So the council every other year, sometimes maybe they look every year, they look at their CIP program, they look at, what does staff prioritize? They're aware what we recommended, they're aware of issues, they were in support that we did, but they've been, wrestling with a slowing of revenue during COVID and, how to fund projects. The last time they looked at CIPs, their finance director said, you have $200,000 and there's $1 million project on the CIP list. So
yeah, so what I'm saying is, because of the infrastructure bill, I'm assuming there's going to be funds where a lot of projects that were put in the back burner probably see the light of day now with these funds. And if if you want to push one of those projects, this might be a good opportunity. I don't know all the details. I just making assumptions from what I hear on the news and all that.
Oh, okay. So you were talking about the construction bill. Yeah, I mean, if there are grant funds available, staff, to the extent that we can, we'll go after them. When we looked at this intersection project and a traffic signal, and Justin was on staff, he looked at the highway safety improvement program, he was able to get the grant for Guadalupe to the rumble strip shoulders after a car had gone off the road. A couple bicyclists had been in accidents. And that they won't pay for traffic signals unless a school is by or pedestrian, either school and or pedestrian warrants met. So if there's other grant funding, yeah, for sure we would go for it. Definitely. I don't think the details of that funding have rolled down locally yet. Now the agencies that are going to hand out the money have to develop a whole program to give out money. So if we hear something, we can go after it.
I guess we'd ask if you could keep it high on your list, Karen. What we ask. We appreciate that. Anything else from anyone? Okay. Our next meeting is November 2nd, Wednesdays. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Recording stopped.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Nice.
Good night.
Thanks.
Karen, I'll